Hello, everyone. Thank you for supporting my channel. If you like the content, please like, subscribe, and turn on the post notification bell so that you'll know when I post future content. I'll be uploading content often about these crazy topics around the world. I'm an American, especially here in America. So if you want to join me, please consider liking and subscribing. But today, I want to get into what are some effects of inflation, how inflation directly affects our households, the rise of inflation, how the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury policies affect our households directly, because it does. When we go out to buy gas, when we go out to buy food, when we notice those prices are high, that's what you call inflation. And the only tool that the Federal Reserve have to fight that is raising the interest rate, which means all the debt, any debt that you have that's directly linked to interest also goes up. And when inflation goes up, we here in America have a problem with American wages have not been increasing for the last couple of decades now. So there is no way that people will be able to chase the cost of those products, meaning more and more people cannot afford the products, goods, and services that we do get here through imports. It becomes a lot more expensive. 23 million Americans have medical debt. How do you think the interest rates are going to rise on that? People who can't afford medical debt now will no longer be able to afford medical debt with the rise of inflation. 88% of Americans are in debt, medical debt included. The United States government now, they also have debt. They have $31 trillion worth of debt. That interest on that debt goes up too. So the federal government is not absolved of having to pay a higher rate aside from us. No, their rates go up too. 37% of households in the United States, that's 45 million car loans. 45 million car loans. That equals to a $1.4 trillion bubble. A $1.4 trillion auto loan bubble that could pop at any given time that could trigger a recession. Any one of those bubbles pop, a recession will soon follow. The average American consumer debt is around $96,000 in credit cards, cars, student loan, you name it. But you could take student loans off of that because this is just consumer debt alone. Things that we like, things that we go out and purchase, things that support the economic growth of this country, products and services that we like to buy. Yeah, 90 plus $1,000 in consumer debt. 28% of Americans, 64 million people, have debt in collections, meaning they charged off their debt. They couldn't pay it. 28% of Americans, 64 million people have charge offs, defaults on their credit report, meaning they can't participate, at least fully participate in the economy. They can't get credit, they can't get loans, they can't get additional debt. Less than 25% of Americans live debt free. And for that 25% of Americans living a pretty good life right now because they will not be affected by interest because they have no debt. There's no interest, nothing. So they're free in the clear. Imagine, right? It's a life, trust me. How inflation directly affects our households? Well, usually, as usual, lower income demographics with debt. Now, minority households assume the biggest risk when taking out debt. We go typically the route of higher interest rates on things like payday loans. And surprisingly enough, people get car title loans where they'll go into these places and put their car up for collateral to take on some debt. And if they cannot pay that debt back, their car get taken. just like your home or anything else will get a lien put on it. Amazing, right? The middle class population are usually the largest demographic of small business owners, which makes up 99.9% of US businesses. That's 33 million small businesses from the middle class, our parents. They tend to go out, put their money where their mouth is, source equipment, source products, get a loan, and start a business. That's the majority of the businesses here in America. It's not the major corporations and the Fortune 500 companies. No, it's the small businesses that employs the local community. That means when those businesses are affected like they were in 2020 when the world shut down, those small business owners cannot source products anymore. And if they do, they get them at inflated prices. They have loans on their equipment. Let's say you own a bakery. You took out a loan or you put the stove or the oven on your business credit card, or you have to buy your reoccurring supplies every month. You put that on your business credit card. All of that is tied to interest rates. And when inflation goes up and the interest rate goes up, the cost of that goes up too. And they still have to service that debt, whether they're in business or they're on the verge of going out of business. They still have to service that debt. So that affects millions of small businesses around the world. They can no longer get cheap products. They can no longer source for the things that they need. And that generates an economic downturn. The rise of inflation, it puts small business owners in a position where, like I said, they can no longer afford to make payroll even. So that triggers mass layoffs. Mass layoffs trigger housing crisis. Now, the housing crisis in 2008, I believe it dropped somewhere around 14%, and that caused the globe to go crazy, starting here in America, and then it spread across the globe. A domino effect in 2008. That was the market dropping at 13%. Well, this time around, it's an even bigger bubble. So, economists and people who study this stuff around the world guesstimate that it could drop by 34% or so. And that will give us the biggest housing crisis we have ever seen, far surpassing 2008. And we all know how that went. It triggers government debt increases. The government interest rates increases, like I said. The government has $31 trillion worth of debt. And let's say the interest rate now in the US is at 4.5%. 4.5%. That means you mortgage out a home, you pay 4.5% on the interest, right? Well, if Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve, raised it to 9% to fight inflation, then that's an additional, $500 billion that the United States government has to pay to service their debt, that $31 trillion. And that's just interest only. So, like I said, the government is not absolved of it. They don't want the interest rates to raise either, because then they can't afford things. And the only way they go to the Federal Reserve and ask for stimulus or a debt ceiling raise is if they cannot pay their bills. They meaning the federal government. And that triggers stock market crashes. I'm talking everybody. People who own real estate, anyone who has assets. You got assets in the stock market. You have assets, period. It's going to be devalued. That's kind of how it goes. And when all that triggers, then job losses follow. But the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury is directly linked to that because they control our money. They print our money. They decide how much money is in the economy, how far things can go, how rich we can get. Will the Feds win the battle with inflation? Who knows? Who knows? No one knows. But they're fighting it at this moment as I speak. They don't want to have to, but they have to. It's the only tool that they have, raising interest rates. Can the Feds truly step in a boxing ring with inflation? That's going to be a sight to see. Because if they truly get serious about fighting inflation, that means that politicians will be forced to do their jobs, balancing that pesky little thing called the budget. They have to balance that. They have to maintain the budget. That 31 trillion, yeah, they'll have to get that down. But the federal government hasn't been fiscally responsible for decades now. They continuously go to the Federal Reserve. We need a loan. We need a loan. We need a loan. They owe the Federal Reserve trillions of dollars. And they have to pay that interest on that debt to the Federal Reserve. Otherwise, they're in default. And when the government goes into default, it's an ugly day. That means the government can't pay their bills. That means government spending on programs such as Social Security, Medicare, the defense budget, all of those things are affected because our government poorly managed everything. Private businesses, they buy a you'll have a business that literally fails, mismanaged. It may be too big to fail. So the federal government or the Federal Reserve will go in and bail that business out and then put the failing business assets on their balance sheet. They absorb it so that it won't trigger anything going down in the economy. Too big to fail. That became a real popular term around 2008 because they bailed out everything, even though everything was poorly managed. They were trying to avoid the economic crash, but unfortunately they couldn't. But then they wind up propping it up with stimulating the economy, printing more money, printing more money. But when you print money, that makes inflation worse, meaning the cost of our products and goods continue to go up because there's no way you could continue to print money and it doesn't trigger or affect anything else in the economy. But that's when we get into the effects of job loss. The effects of job loss, oh, it's a sad sight to see. I mean, I talk about the rat race a lot, but that's describing someone who's continuously chasing money to service their debt. Now, when you have a person who's on that loop and then they lose their job, it's not a good thing. I'm talking cars, their goods, their technology, everything, it ceases to exist. They can no longer participate in the economy. It's amazing. Let's see. How much money has entered your life, right? So we're thinking in terms of people losing their jobs. Now, people tend to heighten these questions after they lose their job. Dang, how much money has entered my life? How much of that money did I save? How much do I still have? Do I have anything of value? Is my net worth, is it where it's supposed to be? Did I invest it? Did I leave anything for my children? Did I spend it all? And usually, they didn't save, they didn't invest, they didn't, they don't have a net worth. It depleted because they spent it all. But now they have no job to generate any income to fill back up the cookie jar, if you will. Their savings. The effects of job losses, we've seen it time and time again. The financial anguish is obvious. Oh my God, it's so obvious. Stress, 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 stress. When you lose a job, stress takes a heavy toll on your mood and how you deal with family and friends. You may no longer want to associate with friends. You may stay in a house more. You may do a lot of things that goes against what you did prior when you did have a job, when you had a bit more confidence, when you had more cash and you were able to actually participate and go out with your friends and buy your own drinks, and that affects everything. You can no longer participate in the economy because you can't afford it. Your friends say, "Come on, let's go out for drinks." You have to say no. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to sit there and wait on someone else to offer to pay your tab. That has to be very uncomfortable. It affects your overall mental health when you're facing debt storms. You can no longer afford to pay your bills. Our jobs are often more than just ways we make living. Some people are directly tied to their jobs. It determines how they see themselves, how their socioeconomic group sees them as well. And that's very high on some people's priority list. Others may not care, but for some people, it's their everything. There are societal costs of high unemployment, governmental costs, the loss of production of workers, which produces gross domestic products, the GDP. Now, the GDP is how a government makes its money. That means whatever products the government is making, producing. They then package up those products and export those products across the globe and generate income on those exported products. And that gives a country their overall pot of money, how much money the country made in one fiscal year. The whole economy suffers indirectly if the GDP goes down. That means the government didn't bring in any money. They may choose to tax us, but politicians usually try to stay away from taxes because they want the votes. So they try to avoid taxes. Then they go the backdoor route and they try to find other ways to generate income because they no longer have the GDP to support it. Let's see. For some people, losing a job is one of the most stressful and painful events they've ever experienced. They feel like they no longer have a purpose, leading to feelings of emptiness, uselessness, which are almost often common symptoms of depression. Depression leads to drinking or other substance abuse problems, gambling, and other addictions. It all kind of ties together. Then, when they do, or if they do, sober up and grab their sanity back, the labor market is still jacked up. So they have a difficulty finding jobs. They have limited negotiating powers in getting another job. They have employment gaps. Who knows how long people will be unemployed? There's no time limit, but that time limit, that time that you're off work is a gap in your employment, your overall physical and mental health. It's kind of like the processes of grief. They go through a denial phase, they go through an anger phase, they go through a bargaining phase, they go through depression, and then they just screw it. I accept it. It's my faith, or it happened, it happened. I have to deal with it. I have to find my next move and continue to live my life. Meanwhile, the rising cost of consumer goods and services continue to go up. Do you live below your means? Do you minimize it? Do you try to cut costs? Do you budget? And what should be included in the budget is what? Housing, transportation, food, utilities, entertainment, and the likes. 78% of United States households live paycheck to paycheck, trying to make the ends meet, right? They can't fully participate. They can't go out there and buy things like they usually would have because they have to try to meet the next month bills. Now, like I said, inflation is just a measure of how much things rise in price over time. And somehow it's up to not somehow, but it's the job of the federal government and the Federal Reserve to get that back down. You can't have prices rising, gas prices up, everything up, and then a politician steps to the podium and say, vote for me. That's one of their biggest fears. But that's all a part of global trade. Globalization. Globalization is something ushered in basically by America. America protects the water. They protect all of those products moving on the water via ships, cargo, making sure that pirates and whatever you want to call it aren't hijacking the ships, and those ships have to have insurance just in case something happens or the ship capsizes and all of the goods are lost on the ship. Those ships have to be insured. But we're looking at interruptions in globalization and global trade for about the next 5 to 10 years. We've seen a hiccup in the system in 2020. We've seen bottlenecks, we've seen freezes, we've seen supplies coming in. And for all us business owners, you sourcing products, your products taking 3 months, 4 months to come, sometimes 6 months. The supply chain is moving so slow. Yeah, all of that is global trade. But it's all going to go downhill for a while. You have manufacturing in China is reducing. They're losing market shares to India, Vietnam, and all other kind of places. So it's a whole global reset happening. And those who are in these positions now may not be in those positions later. But us here in our households, which we tend to care more about than just the generalized globe itself, right? But trade it directly lends to the world prosperity. It fuels economic growth for each country, a direct reflection of how many at any given country is producing. Like I said, that's the GDP. So the GDP, the amount of products one country produces in a year's time. What is your country producing? What are their production levels? What are they exporting? That makes up your country's GDP, how rich your country is. Governments generate money by selling these products. They're supposed to funnel it down in cost savings to the citizens, but that ain't that's not always the case. Especially when you're dealing with politicians who aren't so trustworthy. Manufacturing, each country has a manufacturing sector that produces these jobs, right? So when you manufacture those goods through GDP, those manufacturing jobs produce income for people, right? And then they go out into the economy and produce. It's kind of how it works. It generates and produces jobs. And that helps to rise the living standards for each country. You can move from poor socioeconomic classes to middle class, and so far and on up the ladder, right? You don't necessarily have to stop at the middle class. International trade allows countries to expand their markets and access goods and services that would otherwise not be available domestically. As a result of international trade, the World Trade Organization, WTO, led by America, makes those markets more competitive. This ultimately results in more competitive prices and bringing a cheaper product home to the customers. International trade ultimately leads to an increase in economic development, which in turn results in the improvement in quality of life, increasing revenue, and a better relation between countries. Countries develop their relationships, like America and China developed a relationship over the last 40 years because China and the US are the two biggest exporting partners. They trade to each other, and they're the biggest two in the world. China exports a lot to Europe. Russia exports a lot of oil and gas to Europe by way of Germany. It's a whole globalized system. An increase in globalized trade triggers the movement of people from rural areas meaning poor, usually, right, to urban areas where you have a little bit more money to spend. And that has been accelerating. Like I said, China, for example, China in the 1980s, a lot of people were more rural than city. But now you look at China and you see the economic boom over the last 40 years, and you see China as it is today. But it was not like that 40 years ago. And I do believe America ushered and vouched for China to join the WTO, the World Trade Organization, because the trade organization didn't have faith in China because of their governmental policies from the past. They didn't trust it. But the United States said, "No, they're good. They're our trading partner." And vouched for them, got them in. Ever since then, China been trading like crazy. Now the downside, like I said, you have, it's amazing when you watch it. That GDP I talked about, the gross domestic product, how governments directly make money annually. You have a lot of corrupt politicians and businessmen that don't let that money funnel down to the citizens of that particular country. So you don't see the benefits of it throughout certain countries because their politicians and businessmen won't allow it to funnel down. Who benefits most from the World Trade Organization? Well, you have members of the organization, like I said, the United States, China, Germany. Now, Germany is the biggest producer in Europe. Most people think they're individual countries, but they're all a part of the European Union. It's power in numbers. So all of these countries in Europe decided to join together under one umbrella for the sake of power of numbers. But Germany is the number one producer in that equation. Think about it. How many foreign German cars do you got? We love them here in America. They export them cars and all of that stuff all over the world. So the United States, China, and Germany are the three biggest producers for the World Trade Organization. They benefit the most from having membership in that organization. But like I said, globalization is on the verge of breaking down. You have Russia playing with Germany. Russia don't want to give Germany oil anymore because you have the Nord Stream pipelines 1 and 2 that lead from Russia directly into Germany. And Russia have been providing Germany fuel for decades now. And now that Russia has sanctions on it and Russia, want to fight back against the sanctions, they like, well, we're going to freeze out or we're going to starve out Germany. We're going to cut off the pipeline. So much so, well, it's still under investigation, but I think it was September 2022. Just out of the blue, well, Russia said, we're going to shut Nord Stream Pipeline 1 down for services, maintenance. It's something going on. We need to go in there. They send these robots in the pipe and go down there and fix it. Well, that didn't work. And shortly after that, somehow, some way, the pipeline blew up in the Baltic Sea. Just blew up. Russia saying I didn't do it. The countries of the Baltic Sea where the pipeline is, like, I didn't do it. Russia blaming America. But nonetheless, that fuel is not going to Germany anymore. So that's going to directly affect Germany's production. All of the car production going to slow down. Germany is trying to get through a cold winter. They're trying to not deplete their reserves of fuel so that people can power up their stoves and their gas furnaces and all of these things to keep their homes warm during the German winter. We all know the Russian winter is super cold, but the German winters get pretty cold too. They're neighbors, for crying out loud. But Russia's playing that game. But they say y'all started it first. Y'all put the sanctions on us, right? And that stopped Russia from participating in the globalized economy. Globalization has ceased to exist for them. Russia can't get the insurance, they can't export, they can't do anything for them. Nothing. That's what sanctions do for. When Russia decided to invade Ukraine, those were the consequences, affecting their globalized trade. Now they have to find new partners in who? China. China and India have been buying up Russian oil on the cheap. But Russia can't continue to give India and China those discounts on the oil because Russia still has to make money. That's the main and majority source of income for Russia. Russia's not producing cars and stuff on a mass scale like Germany, or producing mass products like China, or producing products and things and services like America. No, they're kind of like almost like a one trick pony. They're the gas station of the world. Much like China is the warehouse of the world, the workshop of the world, if you will. Now, what's included in these trading items are usually our consumer goods, the things that we get on a regular basis, right? And most people don't know that stores like Walmart, 90% of Walmart goods, everything you see on their shelves, the whole entire store, 90% of those goods come from China. They're manufactured in China, which means globalization. It has to be traded in, it has to be imported in. It's not made here in America anymore. Made in America been gone. Everything you see is made in China, right? But the United States is now trying to flip that back to made in America. And like I just said, China's losing market share to India, Vietnam with manufacturing. So China's not going to have the mass monopoly on manufacturing anymore. It's going to go away. What's also included in that those trading products, the TV sets and things that we get, our beautiful iPhones, our clothing, capital goods like machinery and raw material, our food, everything comes through globalization, trade. What one country produces, the other country may not produce. Some countries are oil producing countries. Other countries don't have oil reserves. Some countries produce wheat. Other countries don't have wheat. Wheat is imperative to make bread, pasta, all kinds of things that you need wheat for. And one of those special little places is Ukraine. Produce sunflower oil, sunflower seeds, all of that stuff. It's the reason why Russia wants Ukraine. It ain't just Ukraine trying to join NATO. Oh, it's a lot more tied into that. It's the products, it's human resources. Russia's on the decline with people. Their demographics is declining. People with the war in Ukraine have been mass exiting Russia like crazy. Direct effect on their manufacturing. It's called a brain drain. All of their smartest, youngest people exiting the country, going to other neighboring countries and exercising their skills there because they no longer see Russia as a viable place to thrive. So Russia's losing all of their brain power. Young people that they need is leaving. Now you have other transactions involving services. So there's goods and there's services. You have travel services. You have whole countries like a Sri Lanka or, you know, uh, uh, in India, any places they have tourist attractions. Dubai been high on the list with ramping up their tourism, right? Everybody want to go there, but it's all to bring people in, and those are whole industries for that country. If that industry goes away, that country no longer makes any money. You have payment systems. Those all tie into services. Call centers. How many times have you called to pay your bill and you're talking to somebody in India? I'm just saying, this is how globalization works. It's a whole delicate system, and it's on the verge of collapse. All countries want to be the superpower. You got China trying to overstep America, even though America helped them and they directly got rich off of America. Now they like, nah, we want to crush you. We want to take your spot. And America would be a fool to sit back and just let them do it. So yeah, I mean, it's a fight right now. It's a battle, an all-out battle in globalization. The whole delicate system is about to crash. And people aren't going to want to trade. You have China playing these games because Australia leader asked for an investigation into the 2020 sickness and why the world shut down, and why is China exporting these faulty vaccines and faulty respirator machines. And the minute that Australian leader, when he posed that question to the World Health Organization, who? World Health Organization, that's the acronym, WHO. So they proposed that to WHO. China said, whoa, you're one of our trading partners. You snitching on us? Basically, is what they were saying. So China got real petty. Now, China and Australia have a particularly unique trading agreement. Australia has a particular type of coal that they produce, and China industries thrive on that coal. All of their machines, everything is designed for Australian coal. You can try to get some lesser grade of coal from another part of the world. It's not going to work well in those machines because over the decades, they have been getting that coal from Australia. Well, when the Chinese government got pissed off at the Australian government, China said, we no longer want to buy your coal. We're not going to import your coal anymore. And Australia had to go and find another trading partner to fill that gap of China taking themselves away. Meanwhile, China still needs Australian coal. So they go all the way around the world, buy it from somebody else, which is still Australian coal. They just don't want to get it from Australia itself. Very petty. But it's the little petty things like that. And the United States government is they're losing interest in protecting the waters of the world. Globalization, global trade. They're losing less interest in it. They funding it all by themselves for the most part. We pay $890 something billion a year to protect the globe, to protect us domestically in defense. The United States tired of playing that game and reaping very little benefit from it. Now, what is the Fed and the government doing to slow down or stop inflation in a recession? Now, inflation ends in one of two ways. One way can be a financial accident. Any one of those bubbles pop. Mortgage, student loan, auto loan, anything can trigger it. But this whole system blows up, right? Like 2008, a financial accident, which was the housing market busting. It was it caused the whole economy to crash. So, but that's the thing. A financial accident is deflationary. It brings inflation down. So that's how, but who really wants that scenario, right? Because the 2008 crisis meant a lot of people lost their homes, a lot of people lost jobs, everything. People lost their assets on the stock market, everything went down. So that's that one scenario. A financial accident, bankers doing what they do and screwing up the system, that'll trigger it. Now, the second way, the Fed's monetary policies are successful and defeat inflation. If the Feds are actually successful in fighting inflation. Now, this has only happened one time. In the 1980s, one time only. Feds only beat inflation one time. And that was Paul Volcker. He achieved this in the 1980s by raising interest rates above the rate of inflation. The Feds beat inflation for the first time and ain't beat it since. It's been going up. It started going back up, and they used quantitative easing stimulus in 2008, and they haven't been able to reverse it ever since 2008. It's amazing. So it ends in one of those two ways. So we're hoping the Feds win the battle. I'm rooting for them. I want their monetary policies to win so that we'll all be successful. We'll all win. We'll all defeat inflation, right? Our prices of goods and services go back down. The market is now stabilized. People assets are stable. That's what that means. Are you prepared to win? Are you prepared to break even? Or will you lose everything? Because in 2008, a lot of people lost everything: homes, cars, jobs, livelihoods, everything gone. Blink of an eye. And it was nothing that they could do about it. And most of them, it was at no fault of their own. It was those financial accidents, those bubbles popping, the mortgage crisis of 2008. They didn't package up all these mortgage backed securities and sell them across the globe. The bankers did that. But it was the American public and the rest of the world who suffered for that. That's under scenario one. Now, if that happens, it's not a good thing, but it's deflationary, and it could set us up for a nice little reset. But who knows? Who knows? People trying to sell their homes in this market. Home sellers have a dilemma right now. Selling in a recession or approaching a recession. Why would they sell their homes approaching a recession? If they bought the home at a 3% interest rates, they got in their home, they got the loan for 3% interest rates. Why would they sell their home only to re-enter the market, and let's say the Feds get interest rates up to 9%? Now they go back in the housing market at a 9% interest rate. Why would you do that? You had a 3% interest rate. So homeowners are faced with that dilemma. Do they sit and watch the prices continue to drop to that 34% I was talking about? Or do they sell? And right now, a lot of people are not in financial shape to buy homes. Like I said, we're approaching a recession. It's about to be a cold downturn. And I hope that a lot of people are prepared. I hope a lot of people are paying attention. It's been economists and people who pay attention to this stuff have been ringing their bells for years. I've been listening to them. I've been paying attention to them. Some of them are my favorites. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't take heed until it's too late, until they're watching it on the television and the news reporters telling them that their homes are no longer valuable or as valuable. The goods and services are going up. And then people start panicking. Job losses. This company is laying off 100,000 employees. This company laying off 10,000 employees. Oh, you're going to hear it. 2023 is, if not 2023, because no one knows when it's going to pop, either one of these bubbles. But we'll be pushing it if we get to 2024. We'll be very lucky if we could kick the can to 2024. But it's all going to come down. It has to. It's kind of how the system works. There's booms and busts. Booms meaning everybody's getting rich, money flying everywhere, everybody assets up. A bust means people losing assets, everything going down. Those are a part of the economic cycle. It's inevitable. It has to happen. And we have been running wild with debt for over 40, 50 years. It has to pop. And when it pops, I'll be here to talk about it. So until next time. Sweaty palms ain't making it much better. Something about you feels so special.